This is the user guide for version 3.5 of CheckIron. This version is made in November 2024. CheckIron is a citizen science project now running for more than 5 years and has collected data from nearly 3,000 individuals. In fact, we are now the third largest hemochromatosis study worldwide in terms of suffering people. Note our goal is to provide useful information to each of those individuals. Information which they can use for themselves and family, and indeed provide prevention pathways for family members not yet with symptoms. In CheckIron, data can be loaded from Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, or Family Tree DNA, and in this version we've added whole genome from nebula.org. Many more formats are supported too. If you do have a choice, we do recommend Ancestry genotype DNA because it does support most of the important genes and mutations for hemochromatosis. 23andMe is adequate. It is not quite as good for hemochromatosis, and the others are in between 23andMe and Ancestry. We have no affiliation to any of them. I'm going to show you how you would get your data from Ancestry. So go to ancestry.com. and you should select the cheapest one. They post you a kit and you spit into a tube and you post it back to them. It takes about 6 weeks to process, and then go back to the website and choose account settings and then DNA, then scroll down to the bottom and you'll see download your DNA. You agree to the conditions and then click continue, and then choose to send an email to verify your email address. Then you go to your email and get the code and type it in. Now confirm your download and it will say check your inbox. You have to go back to your email, you get an email, and then you click download. And it finally appears on your computer as a zip file, which you shouldn't expand. Now go to checkiron.com and click check now, and it will take you to a point where you can upload the file, the zip file that you just got. You agree to the conditions and it starts downloading. Now the actual download of the file is quite quick on a good internet connection, but then the processing of that file can take 5 minutes or so, and it will count you down. Now obviously we're not going to wait 5 minutes. We'll skip forward now some time. The machine can be processing other people's data, so it can actually take longer than 5 minutes, in which it will show you the next screen briefly before it finishes completing. This screen shows you that you still have to wait, and then it will process your data. And here is my data coming up. Now the point about this screen is it shows you the estimate of when it thinks you might start getting symptoms. And it also asks you to put in the actual age you were when you got symptoms. In this case, I was 60. The next screen shows you the overall risk score of 25. And if we zoom in a bit, we can see quite a lot of the detail. So first of all, it does say this person is 22% worse than the average person. It then mentions overall coverage to be 73% for Ancestry DNA. So it knows the used Ancestry DNA, and 73 is quite good. and it will be the same for all people using Ancestry recently. Then it says hemochromatosis type 1 coverage is 100%. This means we support, or Ancestry support, all three of the HFE mutations. Now, if you've used 23andMe before 2023, you would have seen 66% there, because one of the mutations is not supported, or was not supported until last year. Now, looking below that, we've found 16 genetic issues, and the most significant is type 1. And later we'll look at type 1 and see what condition this person has. And lesser issues from inflammation, MTHFR, hypothyroidism, etc., etc. Well, now all these are in order of importance, so the earlier things are the worst things. Now, it's important to realize why we list all these other diseases when the purpose of CheckIron is to look at hemochromatosis. And it's simply because all these diseases are related to hemochromatosis, and all these metabolic diseases actually increase the rate of loading of iron. So you must look at all of them. And in fact, many of them, for example, diabetes or lactose intolerance or gluten intolerance, can actually be improved by purely changing your diet. So it's worth considering making those improvements to see if it actually improves hemochromatosis itself. Now, a lot of people seem to ignore these other diseases, but they're actually just as important as hemochromatosis results themselves. So all the results are important, and when discussing them on, say, the CheckIron Facebook group, then you should do screenshots of perhaps not only this page, but the table underneath it. It can be quite a long table, but we'll just at the moment just look at the top. So in this case, we have hemochromatosis type 1 as 120% worse than average. This is because this person's got two C282Y mutations. The next worst score is actually heart, which is new in version 3.5. But for now, we don't know the comparison with average because we don't have enough data on that. That will be filled in later. His next worst in terms of score is inflammation, and but this is actually 11% better than average. And that's why it's better to look at the percent more worse or better, which corresponds to the colours on the right-hand side. So a red is more than 100% worse, and a green corresponds to better, and all the other colours in between of the rainbow are in between in terms of better or worse. Now, the other thing to mention is at the bottom of the table, there's a button with the word Show Zero Risks. Clicking on this shows the diseases we did not find a risk for in your data. To be clear, some DNA providers do not support some diseases as well as others. Now, that was the overview, but we can also jump into the detail for each item. And looking at HH type 1, here we actually can see the detail, which this person is homozygous C282Y, and also has a BMP2, which speeds up loading, and a TF, which also speeds up loading. Then this person's next problem was inflammation, and then MTHFR, and so on. Now, one of the new features of CheckIron version 3.5 is support for secondary hemochromatosis. This is where people can get iron overload for other reasons than the known hemochromatosis genes. There are three scenarios: someone having multiple blood transfusions, someone eating or supplementing excessive iron, or chronic red blood cell destruction causing severe iron imbalance. Now let's look at a case where we don't discover any hemochromatosis genes. In this case, we add a new feature called iron modifiers, where we list some of the genes that affect the rate of loading of iron and are still effective for secondary hemochromatosis. In the case of chronic red blood cell destruction, in this case hemolytic anemia, we will, in the iron modifier section, mention the discovery of those mutations, if indeed we found some. Another major new feature in CheckIron version 3.5 is support for whole genome genetic data from nebula.org. Now, we actually wrote this software 2 years ago, but we did not release it because the user experience was unsatisfactory. The problem is the data files involved are massive. In fact, 66 times bigger than today's genotyping raw data files. In this version, we've managed with a lot of effort to reduce the processing time for these files to just 10 minutes. So that part can now be lived with. But there are still some big differences in how we display the results. We don't show the coverage anymore, as it should be 100% by definition. And for now, the percent better and percent worse calculation is more inaccurate because we compare the average, including the genotyping data. With time and many more uploads of whole genome data, we'll be able to make that calculation much better. Also, for now, Nebula is the only supported supplier, even though Ancestry do optionally create their own format of data called Next Generation Sequencing. Long term, we'll support Ancestry Next Generation Sequencing too. Okay, now let's just go through the changes that have happened in CheckIron version 3.5. We've added support for heart genetic issues. We've added support for secondary hemochromatosis in two ways: new anemia mutations that cause early RBC destruction, and also we identify iron loading speed gene modifiers, we call iron modifiers, for secondary hemochromatosis cases. We've added support for whole genome, Nebula only. Genotyping is still better in this area for now, but it will mature in the next few years. We've improved the user interface, but there's still more to do. And we've fixed some bugs. In particular, there was a problem with Internet Explorer when we had poor internet conditions. And also, we had a bug which over-reported one of the mutations for hemochromatosis type 3. This affects about 175 people done in previous results. That concludes the user guide for version 3.5 of CheckIron. And please like and subscribe this video to check for future new videos. Thank you.